One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. I'm here at the 2018 NACDA Convention, and I'm joined by John Shukie, who is the president of Forward Progress, which is one of the few, if not the only, NCAA academic consulting firms. Greetings, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Good to be here.
Now, John, your background is as a lawyer. You spent 8 years at the NCAA National Office as Director of Academic and Membership Affairs. And one of the initiatives coming up this year is the NCAA Academic-Based Revenue Distribution Initiative. The term has been tossed around a lot over the last year and a half. Can you give us some insight on the background of this upcoming initiative and what exactly it is?
Great. Thanks, Ty. Yeah, it's definitely getting a lot more notoriety these days as we're getting closer to kicking in. So about 2 years ago now, the Division I Board of Directors, they had a working group that looked at how the NCAA distributes its revenue from the CBS Turner men's basketball television contract. And they were looking to see is how we distribute this revenue, does it align with our values as an association? And they determined that there was a bit of a miss there, that as it stands today, money from that tournament is distributed based primarily on how teams do on the court. The money goes to the conferences and then distributed to the schools that way. And so any new money from that CBS Turner contract is now going to be distributed to conferences based on hitting academic benchmarks. So a total change in philosophy. This is all new money, though. The revenue units, men's basketball units, will stay the same, but these academic units, starting with the first unit in 2020, in June of 2020, will be distributed to schools based on hitting academic marks.
Okay, excellent. And receiving monetary distribution is something that most schools would welcome. And, I consider you an expert on this subject, so what can schools do to prepare themselves to be in the best possible position to benefit from this new program?
Sure, and to give you a sense, too, of what we're talking about here, we're looking at the first year about $50,000 per school, up to, in year 5, we're looking at about $500,000 per school for the next 8 years. So, big money, big impactful money that could be coming to campus. So I look at it, there's 3 things they can be doing right now today. The first is projecting. So 2 of the ways you can hit this distribution are graduation rate-based metrics, which you can know pretty far ahead of time. So it's working and figuring out years ahead of time where you might stand. And very few schools are doing that kind of projection because they didn't need to in the past. There was no money tied to graduation rates necessarily. And so projecting is the first. Projecting out APR, projecting out your grad rates. The second is analyzing. So after projecting, you got to analyze where are we tripping up? Who might be giving us APR trouble? What teams? What type of student athlete? What kind of profile? What can we do to maybe reallocate resources to affect any of our problem areas? And then the third is utilizing. So you got to project, you got to analyze, you got to utilize. There are a lot of different ways you can improve your numbers. The first and foremost, if you bring in more prepared students, right? That's the easiest way to do it. That's not always necessarily possible, maintaining competitive balance among your teams. So there are things you can do, strategies such as delayed graduation points, such as utilizing financial aid, making decisions through what we call the APR lens, to make sure that you are understanding how any decision impacts your bottom line, which your bottom scores, which could impact your bottom line down the road in earning these distributions.
And I'd imagine that schools were preparing and looking at some of the things you mentioned before there was a monetary incentive involved. I mean, of course, this is if we're doing what we say we're doing here in college athletics, meaning bringing students on campus and preparing them for life after sports. Now, when the APR was introduced a few years ago, it was a great thing because it affected scholarships and introduced different ways to make sure schools focused on what's important regarding student athletes. So now we have this revenue distribution model, which is another incentive to do right by student athletes. I mentioned, I consider you as an expert in the field. Can you tell us about Forward Progress and the services you provide to institutions that would be involved with this academic-based revenue distribution?
So with the APR, as you said, people have been tracking on it, but really it's been, to this point, avoiding low numbers. And now it's the same strategies you used before, but now you're trying to get high numbers. So what we do is we worked with several conferences and schools, and what we come in is we do those three things. We project, we analyze, and we utilize the process. So we will come in and look at all your data, historical data, make sure that you are taking advantage of every process the NCAA allows you to take advantage of. The way I liken it to, Ty, is that if you've got a compliance person who does your APR or your grad rate submission, they may work on that from 3 to 5 days a year because they are being pulled in many different directions. We do it 365 days a year. And so we can come in and find maybe some weaknesses, some pain points that you have, come up with strategies for going forward, working with you to actually submit adjustments to the NCAA, submit waivers, and really give you that full complement of services that you just, no matter how good your compliance person is, that's not what they focus on every day. And so we're able to supplement what you already have on campus.
Right, and it sounds like it's an excellent service provided to institution. Let me dig in a little here. What are some of the trends you've seen since starting Forward Progress in terms of APR and graduation rate? I mean, have you gathered enough data to identify trends and see where schools are in terms of taking this whole student-athlete thing serious?
I mean, the good news is since the inception of the APR and the graduation success rate, which is the NCAA's graduation rate metric, we've seen tremendous improvement in student-athlete graduation. And so just generally, it's been improving every year for the last 14 years, which is great to see. Trends that we're seeing schools get more creative, which is good, and we're going to see it even more with the distribution, meaning APR is based on who's on financial aid. So we're seeing a lot of schools now will give more thought to who is on financial aid, for better or for worse. We might be adding students to scholarship to help bolster our APR scores. We're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of also schools that are investing in bringing students back to graduate. So you see a lot of great success stories. And I was actually on a panel this morning with MOA, and on that panel was the athletic director at IUPUI, Roderick Perry. And Roderick told the story about how they brought back George Hill, and Cleveland Cavalier point guard, to come back to graduate, and it was great for George. It was great for the APR score for the men's basketball team. It was also great for the school because he actually attended commencement ceremonies during the NBA playoffs. So it was a tremendous impact, from a PR standpoint. So we're seeing a lot of those types of things occurring as well.
Right. Now, last question here. I know there's some transfer rules that the NCAA and its member institutions are currently working on, and in the past when the APR was introduced, there had to be some form of aspect regarding transferring students. And I know that they've introduced GPA standards regarding whatever they come up with in terms of transfers, but can you tell us how, I guess, transfers play into this whole conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real-time conversation right now. I mean, as we sit here today,
right.
And it's still quite in flux.
Right.
I think having worked at the NCAA and been at countless committee meetings when my thought is they're going to take a wait-and-see approach, that we're going to have this brave new transfer world, and then we're going to see how that impacts the APR. What I would encourage schools to do is to still think about what processes they can put in place on campus, even if there's an NCAA legislation, but processes they can put in place on campus for determining when someone's able to transfer. The 2.6 transfer GPA or 2.6 GPA is something that's still going to be part of the APR, at least for the interim. And so, talking with your coaches about expectations for students who are going to transfer in their GPA is still important.
Right.
But
right.
I think I'll come back in a year and maybe have a better sense of the impact of that new legislation.
Right. But it's something to take a look at. I mean, within the formula of those three things, you really have to take a look at those things. Who you bring in, how it affects it.
It will greatly impact graduation rates, actually, because one of the rates does not take into account transfers. So if someone leaves, even with a 4.0, they're considered to be a graduation rate hit for that federal rate. So It's going to have an impact for sure, and not a positive one.
But at least with this people will be talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Graduating, grade point averages, academic progress rates. It's all a wonderful thing to have people focus on the student part rather than just the athlete part.
Exactly.
Well, John, this has been an enlightening conversation. I'd like to thank you for joining us here on One Question.
Thank you, Ty. Appreciate it.
That was John Shukie. He's the president of Forward Progress, which is an NCAA academic consulting firm, and this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.